So this is going to be about Israel at war and some of the socioeconomic developments that have been happening inside of Israel. Now, so I'm going to start from this slide right here. It's just showing you what the employment situation is inside of Israel. There are about 19% of the working force that existed before this all started, is currently not employed. That's a very, very large proportion. 1 in 5 people is basically not working. That is divided into the following categories. So the people who are not working, who were working before, can be divided along these categories. Many are in the army. So it says about 276,000 people are in the army. Now, 360,000 were allowed, but not all of them have been drafted yet. There are about 187,000 who are taking care of their children because schools are closed or schools are partially closed. In some places, they're fully open in other places, but there are many places where schools are still partially closed and they have to take care of their children. There are harmed industries that are not able to succeed like they were before. Think about tourism, but even more extreme than tourism is, of course, construction, which is the building industry, which is, of course, has basically stopped for now. And there are, of course, the evacuees, 127,000 or so evacuees, more people than that who decided to leave their homes, but were not considered evacuees officially. And there are some people, of course, who are included in all of those categories. So the overlap is basically taking off the overlap that exists in those groups, and those people who are in more than one group. All told, you have over 750,000 people, Israeli workers, who are not working. That's out of about 3.8 million people. That's about, as we said, almost 20% of the workforce. That's huge. And the Bank of Israel carried out an estimate of how much that loss is. And the loss, no, sorry, this was not the Bank of Israel, the Ministry of the Economy. And the loss that they calculated for the first 5 weeks of this skirmish, of this war, is about 13 billion shekel. And that's about 1%, just a little bit under 1% of Israel's annual GDP. So that's a huge cost, and that's only the cost until now, and that's only the cost of lost work. That doesn't include the direct costs of the war. So now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about each one of these groups, about the Army Reserves, caring for children, etc., and show you a little bit more information about each and every one of these different groups. So with respect to the Army Reserves, if we divide it by the different types of industries inside of Israel, so I've divided basically between high-tech and not high-tech, and divided between services and manufacturing. You can see that about 55% of the firms are saying that they don't have any workers. They haven't been harmed at all in terms of workers being pulled up in the reserves, but it's very, very differently distributed across different types of industry. And what we see is that the high-tech has very, very few firms, much fewer firms who are not harmed. And what that means is that we know that the high-tech is the places where we have the workers who have the most value in terms of the value of the product that they create, their productivity. And they're the ones who are actually having the most workers being taken out and going to Army Reserves. So when you just take a look at the 20% who are not working, it's actually more than that in terms of the harm to the Israeli economy. Moving on to caring for children. So Israel has a color coding system for what's going on right now. This was done by the Home Front Command, which basically then says if you are in an orange area, the orange areas are the areas right around the Gaza Strip and the areas right along the northern border. If you're in those areas, then basically everything is pretty much limited. You really can't gather. There are a lot of things that you're not allowed to do. Certainly no educational activities are possible. Then there's the yellow area, which is in between, a little bit further away. But also there, the only educational activities that you can hold are if the school has a certified shelter. And that certified shelter can fit all the children that are going to be there. And it can be reached within the time specified to be able to reach that, which is a very small amount of time. Here in Petach Tikva, which is pretty far away from Gaza, I can tell you we have 1.5 minutes to reach the safe room. 1.5 minutes is a long time, but it's not necessarily a long time when you have a whole class of children or many classes of children. Then there are the green areas in which you actually can. There are more possibilities. For instance, there are buildings nearby. Then you can have the children go into those different buildings, into the stairwells, and you're allowed to learn there. There are some areas in which it's completely green. All the schools are completely open. So Haifa, for instance, has not been bombed. and all the schools are completely open. There's no issue at all. But if you go to places that are closer, like Rishon LeZion or Rehovot, then you're going to find that the schools are not necessarily operating full kilter. Now, you'll just see here that the color coding has been changed. In other words, these things have eased up in terms of the amount of bombing that's happening, where before October, until October 31st, the color code until the end of October had a lot more yellow and a lot less green. But that was changed to make more places more open since that time. Going on, continuing to talk about caring for children, when you take a look at which businesses, that same division as before, have been harmed, what you see is that the high-tech manufacturing, high-tech in general, is very different from the other types of places. And you see that the high-tech manufacturing actually has very few workers who are damaged from, or very few firms that are damaged from people having to take care of their children and not being able to go to work. While the high-tech services has a lot. Now, that seems a little bit of a strange collection, but when you think about the fact that they have more drafted and there are fewer affected by school closings, then that makes a little bit more sense, and you're able to connect the two. If you take a look at work from home, we know work from home became a very, very successful, very, very big thing during COVID, and here we are having this Zoom call that we would not necessarily have been able to do quite as efficiently a number of years ago. Then we see that obviously in high tech you have more work from home in general, all along the line. That's the bottom bar is until this all happened, and the ones on top are actually the additional workers who are working from home, and you can see that there's a much larger percentage of a much larger increase among high tech than you see among non-high tech. This, of course, is not just people who are caring for children. This is evacuees also, that are also, many of them are able to work, or some of them are able to work from far, but not, of course, all of them.
Excuse me, you have 1 minute.
I have
Thank
1
you.
minute.
One
Okay.
more minute. Thank you.
Then let's just run really, really quickly. When we talk about the harmed industries, again, construction, tourism, food services, smaller businesses have been harmed more than large ones. Firms in the South have been much more severely harmed. The harm comes from two sources: decrease in demand, that there are many things that people just aren't doing, like tourism, but also decrease in supply, which is what we talked about before. And here, actually, I would emphasize just the foreign workers, and especially the Palestinian workers from the West Bank, that here there are very, very serious questions about what's going to be happening after this is all over. Foreign workers from outside of Israel, from the non-Palestinians, have actually left Israel very, very small percentages. And finally, when we talk about the evacuees, so we have a lot of questions we have to think about. We have to think about the housing solutions. We have to think about employment solutions. And we have to think about social services. We have to think about education. What do we do with these children who are out there? Where they're going to get schooling? Do we give them separate classes? Do we give them classes with everybody? If we're giving them separate classes, how are we finding teachers for them? And when we have to think with, and probably the main thing we have to think about are all the health issues. So 20,000 have already been recognized as victims of a terror attack. And in addition, we know that there are very significant mental health issues that are being experienced from all the trauma that they went through. With that, I'm going to end.